Welcome to Great Conf India, Gaurav. Burt. I have a few questions for you. Uh, so, uh, what do you think about the state of Grace 3? Do you feel is it production ready? Would you recommend developers to start moving to Grace 3 now, or we should wait for some time, or when do you expect that to happen?
I'm very optimistic about Grails 3. For a while, and I'm going to talk about this in the keynote, I was very concerned about the future of Grails, especially with Pivotal dropping support. But Grails 3 has turned out to be a really amazing update. Um, and I don't say that to brag about my work. I didn't have much at all to do with it. Um, the early versions of Grails 3.0 were a little rough, but we're up to version 3.0.11 right now. 3.0.12 is coming out soon, and I think 3.0 is very stable, very ready to use. 3.1 is going to be even better, faster, more features. So I think now is the time to. We finally got a lot of the plugins updated that were holding back a lot of people from upgrading. So definitely get ahead of the curve and use Grails 3 now because it's faster, lower memory footprint, lots of great features. Few things that are still kind of rough, but definitely production ready.
Which which framework would you recommend in Groovy ecosystem one can explore apart from, let's say, Grace, Spock? Anything else that you really recommend? Maybe Ratpack there is, and any other framework?
For me, Ratpack is exactly what I was going to say. Ratpack is probably the most exciting thing other than Grails out there. It's really impressive. Its origins are a really tiny little Sinatra clone, and then Luke Daly, and then later on a much larger team really took this tiny little thing, which was pretty cool by itself, and just it's exploded. And now it's based on Netty, so it's asynchronous and non-blocking. And Netty is a really amazing networking library that's very stable. It's used. I saw a talk recently by Norm Maurer, the guy who writes it, and I think they said he's got 400,000 servers at Apple using Netty. So and Ratpack is that great framework. So Netty hides a lot of the gory details of NIO, and then Ratpack hides, smooths some of the edges of using Netty. And it's got a very active community, very active team. A book is being written. Dan Woods is writing a book on it. So Ratpack is a very exciting space. I'm torn between, to be honest, between Ratpack and Grails. It's a very exciting space.
Um, what are the three tips that you would probably recommend to a Groovy or Grace developer that probably they should? The best thing that can do probably. Uh, or maybe to any or any three tips probably that you feel can make a developer more productive.
That's a tough question. I'll sort of probably not give you three, but I'll sort of ramble a bit and maybe have three major topics in there. One is to really educate yourself. A lot of people, it's really easy, I think, to get started with Groovy. It's a very flat learning curve, especially if you're used to Java. And then Grails, I think, is pretty easy to get started with. It's hard to do the hard stuff, but it's really easy to do the easy stuff. But I think a lot of people don't do enough work up front and not necessarily read the reference documentation, but buy and read a book, The Definitive Guide to Grails, Grails in Action. There unfortunately aren't any books out yet that cover Grails 3, but a lot of the ideas in Grails 2 carry over to Grails 3, so you'll be able to get quite far with that. So, RTFM, to be honest. Another thing that I always recommend strongly to people is the idea of owning your code. So especially with like generated code. So we have a lot of generated code. We create the app. That's a script that builds up an app for us. And then we say, Grails create domain class, and then we generate the controller and we generate the GSPs and all this stuff. And a lot of times we don't look at that. We maybe go and make some changes, but we don't really understand what's going on there. And I think it's really important to understand, not necessarily deeply, but understand every line of code, because once that code is in your application or it's in your plugin, that's no longer Grails framework code. That's your code. You own that. And if you don't understand your own code, and I'm talking you plural, you as the team, you're doing your application a disservice. And you can only go so far with that. You don't necessarily need to research every little nuance, but really having a sense of what's going on, because Grails and Groovy, this whole ecosystem, there's a lot of magic. There's a lot of stuff that happens automatically. and we sort of take it for granted, and then when it doesn't work,
Then
why doesn't it work? And you don't understand what's going on, so then you're asking these frustrating questions, frustrating to us who sort of know the answer or might know the answer, because if you had spent a little bit more time sort of understanding your own code, you wouldn't necessarily have to be asking us these relatively basic questions that get asked over and over again. Another big thing that I've been doing a lot now, especially now that Grails, ever since Grails 2.2, we've had Groovy 2.0, and so we can use compile static. And of course, Grails 3 uses Groovy 2.4, and Grails 2.5 uses Groovy 2.3. So all the modern versions of Grails use a new enough version of Groovy that we've got the at type checked and at compile static. And that goes a long way towards making your code a little bit more aggressively checked, early checked, more like Java. So you get that best of both worlds of early checking. You don't necessarily have to wait until at runtime to find a mistake. Better performance, lower overhead, lower memory overhead, because you don't have Groovy checking all those layers of ways that behavior could have been overridden when you didn't do anything at all. You just go directly to the method call. But you also get the nice syntax of creating maps and lists and closures and all that stuff. So you don't get dynamic code, but you get very compact, elegant Groovy code. And of course, you don't want to use it everywhere. The code that needs to be dynamic stays dynamic, but the code that doesn't need to be dynamic should always be compile static.
that should improve the performance.
Absolutely. And you get better autocomplete from the IDEs, and it's just a better experience all around. So I guess that's 3.
All right. So, you also talked about some books. So there is one book from you also, Programming Grails. So is it recommended for the beginners also, or
I think everyone should go out and buy several copies and give them to their friends and relatives. And no, it was intentionally an advanced book. And in fact, when we were talking about the book with O'Reilly about the original idea and then what we might call it, I wanted to call it Advanced Grails. But they were saying that using advanced in the title kills sales, because people who are good at what they do aren't going to buy it, and the people who aren't good at what they it's not a good idea. So they called it Programming Grails instead. It was intentionally written as a second book or third or whatever after you've read the more comprehensive books like Grails in Action and the Definitive Guide. So once you've used Grails and once you've gotten past those early stages and you're more of a mid-level or a senior developer, then my ideas would give you hopefully some deeper understanding of Hibernate and Spring and transactions and that sort of thing. So, yeah, we definitely need. I should update that book for Grails 3, and we definitely have a gap there where we need a Grails 3 book. But I was talking to Soren last night, and apparently there have been discussions within the team at OCI about plans for going forward and getting a new version of Grails in Action or the Definitive Guide up for Grails 3. So that'll be a good thing.
Sure. Thank you, Burt, for your time.